Good afternoon, everyone. We'll get started here in just a moment. I see some people are rapidly joining. We're just a minute or so after 2 p.m. Appreciate you being here on time. We'll get started in just a minute. Again, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Today, we're going on this webinar. We'll cover the Texas PACE Authority's program guide updates and also talk about the online training that we've designed to help all of our PACE stakeholders out. This webinar is one of our T5 series, as we call them, our third Thursday at 2 training series. We try to hold one of these every third Thursday at 2 p.m. So we're here today, and we will get rolling now. I'm going to turn my video off to preserve a little bandwidth, but you'll still be able to hear me just fine, and we'll take questions toward the end. So my name's Dub Taylor. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Texas PACE Authority. I've been with PACE for a couple of years now. Prior to that, spent about over 20 years with the state of Texas doing similar work, but for public sector energy and water retrofits, project financing, engineering assistance. And then prior to public service, was involved in commercial real estate, property appraisal, and tax consulting. So PACE is really tying together both of those worlds. And it's been an exciting couple of years for sure. So for today's webinar, everyone is muted and your video is disabled. So please use the Q&A if you have questions. You'll see the chat and the Q&A in the little dialog box at the bottom or the top, depending on how your screen's configured. So if you use the Q&A for questions, those will be recorded, and I will make sure and get to all of those before we adjourn today. You will have an opportunity to request a PDH certificate for the time you spend with us this hour if you need professional training credits. That will be emailed to you after the webinar, along with the survey, to get your input on the webinar and how we can improve it. Also today, this is a special treat that you get for attending today. You will get a copy of the final draft program guide for review and input, and we will get to that a little bit later in the webinar and how we'd like to get your input on that. And then also a discount code for the online training that we'll be offering. This webinar, like others that we've done as part of this series, is available on TPA's website and our YouTube channel. And as you can see, if you go to our website under the resources drop-down menu, and then education and outreach, you'll see the series of T5 webinars that we started back in 2016, April 2016. And the last one we had was March 17th with a guest speaker from the Department of Energy. So all of those recordings are available there. This one will be as well. So if you have colleagues that weren't able to make it live today, there'll be an opportunity to view that later. So the agenda for today, we're going to do a quick update on the PACE market, which has been exciting this year already. We'll go through the new program guide and some changes, the outline to that. We'll cover the online training, and then talk about some next steps, and then take Q&A at the end if we haven't gotten to questions throughout the webinar. So the market update, let's take a look at there. So PACE, as you may know, was enabled by state law and then requires a city or county to take action to create the program at the local level. So 78 cities and counties have done this. This covers about 72% of Texas's population. If you can see the shaded areas in blue on the map, those are generally where the population centers are. So we have quite a bit of the state covered in terms of population. Obviously, the yellow part of the map, we're a big state, 800 by 800 miles. So there's a lot of yellow there too. So there's opportunities still in less populous areas to adopt PACE as an economic development and financing tool as well. But the trend line is certainly growing. In our role, Texas PACE Authority, we are a 7-year-old nonprofit, 501c3, created exclusively to really provide outsourced PACE administration services for local governments that elect to set up PACE programs. That's all we do. We don't finance projects. We don't do contracting. We don't do bond advisory services or financial advisory services with PACE as a sideline or anything like that. This is all we do. We administer PACE programs for cities and counties around the state. And that's really this governmental function to make sure that all the transactions comply with state law, local requirements, regulations, et cetera. Below the line is really kind of the private transaction part. The property owners are going to work to find a capital provider to finance their project. They're going to work with service providers to scope and implement the project. And we will work with all parties along the way to make sure that the PACE transaction is as seamless as possible. But we serve exclusively this, again, this sort of outsourced governmental function. That's all we do. So PACE by the numbers, if you look at the investment to date, the financing has really been this exponential, really straight line growth. When you put it in a chart, you could just lay a ruler over that and you would see a pretty straight line. And we don't see that stopping anytime soon based on the inquiries and the activities we know about, projects in the pipeline. This all started back in 2015. Last year, 2021 was very strong post COVID year. But even 2020, which was COVID year, we had more individual transactions closed than in any prior year. Smaller, but more individual transactions. And then this year, it's a mix of large and small. And again, many things in the pipeline that we expect to be closing in the next, in the second and third quarter of this year. The types of projects that's been financed through PACE, as you can see in the pie chart, about 30%, 33% commercial and retail, followed by hospitality, hotel, commercial office space, nonprofit, mixed use, and then some others mixed in. And about half, a little more than half of the projects have been energy efficiency related. So these are things like HVAC upgrades and replacements, lighting, building management systems, et cetera. About a third water conservation measures and 12% distributed generation. And I believe those are pretty much all rooftop solar, photovoltaic, and other on-site solar arrays. And the problem, of course, that PACE was designed to help solve is this one, and that is that business owners know intuitively that we can save money over the long haul by making these upgrades to our buildings. The challenge, though, is that these upgrades can be expensive, and business owners typically reinvest their internal capital into growing the business, not to building efficiency and things like this. So this results in equipment that fails or is costly to maintain. If it fails, typically it fails at the wrong time. Your water heater goes out when you're out of town and crashes through the roof. Your HVAC system goes out in the summer, the air conditioning component, not in the winter. And so these things get replaced really at a premium cost on a piecemeal basis with no optimization of the overall building. And this just sort of cascades downhill to really increasing the operating cost of a building. In the case of new construction, things that are less visible tend to get cut when budgets are needed to be reduced. And this practice of value engineering, as it's called, I put value in quotes because there's really not value to it. It is a short-term gain for a long-term loss. So a lot of efficiency that might be specified in new building construction is missed and that goes to haunt the building through its life. So again, all this results in needlessly higher operating costs, lower building performance, temperature control, humidity control inside, lower asset valuation as these mechanical systems degrade or maybe were never the right size in the first place. And that can again, lead to comfort and productivity issues. So that's the challenge that PACE was designed to address. And so PACE, as we probably know, stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. What's missing at the end of the acronym is an F, because it really is a financing structure. It's an innovative financing tool that can provide long-term 100% financing for certain types of energy efficiency, water conservation, and distributed generation projects. This is private financing. This is not government financing. It's government enabled, but it's private financing that's secured by a special property assessment that is in place to over the financing term, which is typically the useful life of the improvements. PACE is authorized under state law, Local Government Code, Chapter 399. It is, again, enabled by cities and counties around the state. You saw the list earlier. Voluntary and open market, meaning that any eligible property owner and any eligible property could utilize PACE. Any financing provider, bank, lender, capital provider can provide the financing. Any contractor can do the work. So it's not a prescriptive list. It's designed to be an open market structure. And the types of properties eligible are commercial, and that includes nonprofit. We've seen projects with houses of worship, other nonprofit entities, multifamily units, 5 units or more, and then in any sort of industrial manufacturing type project is eligible as well. About the only thing that's not eligible is single family residential and residential 4 units or fewer. So that's the update quickly on where things are with the market. Again, we've seen quite a bit of growth, quite a bit of interest, greater awareness, and a very strong pipeline of projects that we're working on right now. So let's look at the program guide and some of the updates that have been made to that. So if you've been involved with the program here, the program guide on the left may look familiar. This was compiled in 2018, and it really has been the standard that we have used since 2018. There were some changes to the underlying guidance on the technical standard side, as well as underwriting standards that warranted updates to the program guide. So we've done that, and the new version, which is version 4.0 on the right, is in draft form still. It's essentially complete, but before we publish it, we wanted to solicit input from stakeholders. And so that's why we want you to take a look at this and provide us impact after the webinar today. So version 4.0 is structured like this. There's an executive summary that's very brief, talks about the program guide, and then there are there are 5 sections. Section 1 is really the meat of the guide. That's really all of the technical details, the step-by-step process for developing projects, and all the associated references. We're going to go into each of these a little bit more in a minute. Section 2 describes services TPA provides. Section 3, this is history and background of PACE in Texas. If you are new to the program or have questions or are looking for, again, background, legal citations, etc. Resources and links in Section 4, and then a glossary of key terms at the end. What we'd heard with our prior program guide was that for a new user, it was not as intuitive to follow step by step. So we've tried to reverse that and focus on the project development process in Section 1. And again, that's really the majority of the program guide. So Section 1 really outlines these 10 steps. These could probably be grouped into probably 3 or 4, but we break it down into these 10 discrete steps. So step 1 goes into how to determine eligibility, both for the property itself and the proposed project or the improvement type. Step 2, how to determine the project scope, how to calculate a baseline for energy or water consumption, and then how to measure the delta or the improvement against that. These all tie back to standards that are in the PACE in a Box set of guidelines. PACE in a Box is really a policy document developed by some 300 volunteers to bring in best practices on PACE implementation. And all of our guideline references back to PACE in a Box. Step 3, determine the capital provider. Again, this is an open market, so any capital provider, lender that the owner chooses. Step 4, looking at how to choose a contractor. Step 5, preparing the application, the documents required, underwriting expectations. Step 6, if there's a mortgage on the property, there is a requirement under state law, the enabling PACE state law, that requires that mortgage holder to provide consent. So the steps of getting that done. Step 7, engaging an ITPR for project verification. So ITPR stands for Independent Third-Party Reviewer. Under Texas law, this is a requirement that an ITPR review the project at 2 stages. This will be a licensed Texas professional engineer with experience in energy efficiency modeling and related types of project activity. So this is really a desk review on the front end to make sure the project is scoped, will produce the savings that are expected. That's chosen by the property owner. Again, being an open market system, any engineer that meets those qualifications can do this work. Step 8, close on the PACE financing. Step 9, move to construction, install it. And then step 10, this is where the ITPR validates the project as proposed is actually the one that got installed, again, to make sure that for the owner and for the lender, that the scope of the project is going to deliver the expectations of savings that everyone's looking for. So that's really kind of the outline. The section 1 will go into more detail in all of these. I'm not going to go through each line today, but all of really the development process is grouped into this section 1. A couple of key changes and key updates in this program guide, again, triggered by policy changes and updates by keeping PACE in Texas and PACE in a Box. One of them goes into detail on redevelopment. So redevelopment is allowed, and the key there is there's a prohibition in the enabling state law for using PACE on greenfields or lots that are undeveloped or are undergoing development at the time of the assessment. However, if there is a lot that has an existing structure that has been cleared and it's being the lot's being reused for something else, we typically see this where in an urban area or an ex-urban developing area, perhaps there was a farmhouse or something on a piece of land, and a developer has purchased the land and is now building apartments. Well, that would be considered redevelopment of that lot because it was developed before. If it is a greenfield, there's nothing that's ever been there, then that is not eligible. But there can be structures that are constructed as an early phase of a development that then receive recognition as being improvements to the property, and that can change the development or change the lot's status from undeveloped to developed. So there's a way to do that, but redevelopment is addressed there. Look back, this is essentially refinancing. So if after a project is completed within 24 months of completion, the project would otherwise have qualified for PACE, and there is clear intent that the owner has either specified high efficiency equipment or met certain high efficiency design standards such as LEED, then the project could be refinanced through PACE. So there is a look back provision, again, for 24 months post completion. LTV, this is loan to value. So the maximum PACE loan can be as much as 25% of the as completed value of the property. So that was 20%, now it's 25%. So there's a little more headroom there, so that more of the project can be funded through PACE. And then SIR, this is savings to investment ratio, another calculation. The idea here is that, you know, these loans are intended to be budget neutral for the owner. So to create headroom, there needs to be savings either in utility budgets, water budgets, or water utility related costs, or related savings, financial savings caused by the project. So we spell out here that at least 50%, 50 plus percent has to be energy or water related. So these would be direct utility savings. This could be if you have an old piece of equipment, a chiller that has a maintenance agreement that has an established cost, and the new equipment means you don't have that maintenance agreement any longer. That avoided cost could be part of the savings, but they have to be energy or water related. And then the balance of the savings can be derived from financial benefits caused by the project again. So that can be things like tax credits, accelerated depreciation, other sort of purely financial savings, not energy or water related. So we go into what that balance needs to be there. And this again maps back to technical standards that were developed by Keeping Pace in Texas. So section 2 goes into additional TPA services. We do a lot of outreach, education, and training. This webinar is an example of that. Annually, we develop an annual report that capsulizes activity during the year and then has project-specific information. As a nonprofit, we have to develop such a report anyway, so we do that, but we also do it so that the different cities and counties around the state have a clearer picture of what's happening overall, and they have specific information on projects in their jurisdictions. We also deliver annual notices to property owners. Again, this is the assessment notice that says you have a PACE loan, your borrower is expecting to receive X number of dollars, and here's the frequency. So we send those notices out as well. And then in the event of delinquent payments, we haven't had these, so this has not been triggered yet, but we obviously would coordinate with the local governments to collect any delinquent payments on PACE installments. Section 3, history and background. Again, we didn't start with this. We really started with the project-related information in the guide, but this is all the background. What is PACE? How did Texas create its program? This is important if you are working in multiple states, because while the PACE concept is pretty uniform state to state, there are some nuances. So it's important to pay attention to how the PACE program in Texas may be slightly different from some other states. Features of PACE financing. What is PACE in a box? I mentioned that already. It's really this uniform guidance that is adopted as a whole by cities and counties so that we have uniform programs, jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Then we go into how the PACE regions are created. There's a two-step process. Local governments go through there to create the programs, and 78 of them have done this. What is our role? We talked about that a little bit already. Is PACE working? It is. We have examples of that and even more in our guide. And then how does a property owner participate? Where do they start? So all of these things are covered in that section. Additional resources in section 4, key links both to our website and to others, case studies on completed PACE projects throughout the state, different tools to help the project stakeholders move along quicker, eligibility checks. So if the question is, does my project qualify? You can check it here. The project database, this is a fairly new thing where all the projects that have closed in the state of Texas are all listed here. There's a graphic, enough project detail showing the size, the parties involved, so you can see the type of transactions that have closed. And then finally, the Keeping Pace in Texas document library which is again where these policy related documents that we all follow and that our program guide maps to are listed there as well. Glossary, 23 key terms that come up every day in the PACE context and definitions of those terms in the glossary. And so that's the 5 sections. Again, most of the emphasis is on section 1, putting a project together, which we think is most interesting, and that's what we've heard from folks that they wanted that to be front and center and as clear as possible. So let's move on to the new online training. So as I mentioned, we've had training and different types of support. A lot of this was in person training workshops done prior to COVID. We moved to this more online platform with regular intervals post-COVID, and we'll continue to do both. But to complement that, we've had requests from stakeholders of all type, from contractors, from capital providers, and from owners, asking, is there an online or an e-training option so that we can go through, be sufficiently educated on how PACE works in Texas and be able to represent ourselves that way to potential clients or customers. And so that's what we've put together here. So there's 3 training modules. This is all one training, but 3 modules. The first one is about PACE, some of the things we've talked about already today. The second module are technical standards and guidance, more sort of in the weeds on those two in those 2 areas. And then the third is really putting a project together, sort of all the details of what needs to go into putting a project together, either from an owner's perspective, a capital provider's perspective, or lender's perspective, or from a contractor's perspective. To support these modules, there is a recorded video for each of them. You will see me and hear my voice. I've done these videos that provides an outline really on the content for each of these areas. And then we have a training quiz, 25 questions that really cover the key points that we feel you should know if you're holding yourself out as a trained PACE service provider. If you achieve a passing rate of 80%, so 20 questions passed, then you'll receive a listing on our website as a trained service provider, and also a logo and a badge that you can use for your website to indicate that you are a trained PACE service provider. So that's really the outline of the training. This is not live yet. If you go to our website, you see where the arrow is pointing. You won't see that training piece yet, but it soon will be live, and that's where you will go to register and start the training. So right there on the front page. And the registration process looks like this. You will go through, you'll enter certain information that'll provide access to all the training videos and the quiz. There is a training fee associated with this, $50 per person. If you have a company with multiple folks that are going through the training, then it's $25 per person. If you are a minority, veteran, or woman-owned business, then you can contact us. We have scholarships essentially to cover the cost of the training if that's helpful. So that's the registration process. Next steps. So as an attendee today, a couple of things you'll receive. Number 1 is the draft program guide in its entirety. That will be sent to you by email after the webinar today. We ask you to please review it and provide us feedback. We have tried to make this as comprehensive but as user-friendly and accessible as possible, but we need actual users and readers to let us know if we've achieved that. So please review and provide us feedback. We'll in the email we'll tell you when we'd like that back. Probably I think we're shooting about 7 to 10 days from now. So we really do value your input. We think this makes sense from our perspective, but it may not from a user's perspective. So we'd like to know that there's an opportunity to make changes now. You'll also receive a discount code that you can use for the online training. we'll email you that as well. So when the online training is live, then you can use a discount code. And because you were here with us today, you will pay much less than anyone else that wasn't on the webinar today. So again, thanks for attending and thanks for your interest today. And then you'll also receive advance notice when that training is live. So we'll let you know before anyone else, this is live and you can go take it now. So different resources that we have available, of course, our website, texaspayesauthority.com. The program guide is listed there. All events and training here, different case studies. We are adding to those as we can, write-ups, photos to sort of help folks better visualize, okay, what does a PACE project look as completed? And then the service provider directory, which has been enhanced if you've not been there in a while, it is sortable by different types of service providers, contractors, capital providers, et cetera, with links. So that's there as well. That's a newly enhanced resource. With the service provider directory, one thing we make sure that folks know is it is an informational listing. It's not an endorsement. So again, being an open market program, we encourage owners and stakeholders to choose whoever it makes sense, but oftentimes they need a starting place. And this is a resource where they can at least start to see the types of service providers that are available in different areas. So with that, I'm going to move on to the Q&A, and I'll just leave this open. I don't see any questions and answers popping up yet in the Q&A box, but I'll leave this open for a few minutes and see if there are any. Again, to reiterate, if you're on the webinar today, look for an email that will include the draft program guide. It will include the discount code for the training, and then we will let you know as soon as the training is live, and we expect that to be very shortly, within a couple of weeks. So I'm not seeing any questions. Here's a question. Okay, can a lender fund in 2 phases? Let's see, John, I see that's from you. I'm gonna try to interpret what you're asking there. A lender well, I guess there's 2 things. A lender can be a primary mortgage holder on the property, and they can also provide financing for a PACE loan. If that's your question. The other would be if a project, I guess, is sufficiently complex and maybe is completed over a 2 or 3 year time frame, and there are 2 PACE loans or 2 separate financings. Could that happen? Yes, that could happen as well. So if that did not, yes, 2 time frames. So I think that answered your question. If not, you've got my email here, and please send me shoot me an email, and I'm happy to follow up and talk to you more about that. Okay, I'll leave this open a little bit longer. Not seeing any other questions pop up. If you have anything, please enter it in the Q&A box now. And if not, I guess we will wrap up half an hour or so early and give you half an hour of your afternoon back. And I will thank you for your attendance today, and look for the email with the information I mentioned, and look for additional T5 webinars monthly as we go forward. So with that, we will end early today, and appreciate your attendance, and we will see you next time. Thank you.